Thank you for joining us here at TSPN's News Desk. I'm Mike Spence, and I'm here with Keith Sweet, our City Council member here in Jackson. Keith, welcome to the News Desk. Thanks for joining us again. I know you're on all the time, and there's always a lot to talk about.
It's always fun to be.
You know, I mean, being a City Council member, there's a lot going on, number one, but I just saw you over today at the Sutter Hill Transit Center, the new opening. They've been open for a while, but they just had their grand opening ceremony today, and that was
I understand
fantastic.
I was the only transit commissioner that wasn't there today. So
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Well, there was a
for
pretty good turnout.
the entire ceremony, that is.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was held in the new area that's their teleconference center. And for anybody who hasn't been over there to see that facility, it's remarkable.
It's a great facility.
They have the teleconference screens, and I mean, they were talking to people in Washington, D.C., and it felt like the big city over there.
Right. Well, it's, it can be used in such a variety of ways. Any businesses or even individuals that want to communicate back and forth. Obviously, college classes and things like that. So you're right. It's a great facility.
Yeah, John Plass spoke to the idea that the Community College Foundation, in those college classes, there are 2 classes in the fall. They had a world geography and a business management course that they're going to hold there and be able to use those teleconference screens to, connect to that whole, get kids credit who can't get out there all the way to Folsom, Sacramento.
Well, I think the future of education, to a large degree, will probably be teleconferencing. Much of it is done at even now, but in the future, much more so.
Well, to see that teleconferencing center and the transit center in general just tied into education, that tie-in is just amazing.
Right.
And then you have the other areas of the transit, the dial-a-ride services for the elderly who qualify, and to see all that transportation being done in a more convenient, safer facility. And that facility is, you can have a picnic up there.
Oh, actually, you should have a picnic up there. When the bypass went through, was the first time I'm sure many people in Amador County got a chance to look at that property because, it was all part of the Allen Ranch and other properties. And now that the bypass goes through, you open up and here's this beautiful lake.
I know, there's a huge lake. I didn't realize there was a lake out there.
All kinds of birds and so forth. And then a nice picnic facility was put there.
I didn't even realize there was a lake out there.
Right.
I was stunned.
Lots
how
of
beautiful.
trees, nice picnic tables. In fact, I think when I left the facility, there were 4 Caltrans trucks parked there for their lunchtime.
Oh, I'm sure they all go up there and park. Yeah, what a
nice
view.
Place.
Yeah,
Anyway.
what a view. Beautiful offices. I just received this invitation. Amador County Historical Society, HS, is that the?
Absolutely, ACHS.
And that is the reopening and special celebration that's coming up for the Amador County Museum. And that's the museum directly above the TSPN offices up there. Do I have that?
On Church Street, right across from Jackson Elementary.
I want to make sure I call that correctly.
That museum has been closed for 5 years for seismic issues. Long story as to how it got reopened. Much of that is because of the cooperation between the county and the Historical Society. Of course, the society signed an agreement on last month on the 14th with the Board of Supervisors, with the county. We will now, I say we, I'm on the Board of Directors of the Historical Society. We will now manage the museum and pay the ongoing daily expenses. The county is still on the hook for, a new roof if it blows off or, for whatever.
Right.
So we have retrofitted it so it meets the seismic issues, or corrects the seismic issues that we had, and have totally taken apart the inside of that museum and have put it back together. A group of very dedicated individuals under the direction of the former museum curator, Georgia Fox, and the new museum chairperson for the Historical Society, Judy Jebian, and a whole host of others have been painting and outside and inside and then putting together these exhibits. We're very excited about it. It's going to open, as I said, for the first time in 5 years to a special wine tasting that you're holding.
Oh, yeah.
Wine and cheese as you're holding in your hand there.
I had Phil Giuliani on the show, and we talked in detail about it,
right.
But he never gave me an invitation.
Well, those invitations were sent out to members and other selected individuals who have donated time and energy and money and materials to this project. That's Friday evening, the 14th. The whole weekend is called Celebrate Amador.
Right.
And normally on the 14th, the Historical Society has a fundraiser. That's the county's birthday, and so that's the day they have two major fundraisers a year, and that's on one of them. But they've set aside that fundraiser to join with me and my committee, the Save the Wheel Committee, to put it all together under a Celebrate Amador title. And we're going to have two things happening that day, and that is the Kennedy Wheels will have a grand reopening, Wheels Park, and the museum on the 15th then will be open to the public.
That's why I wanted to tie that in, because it's all happening at the same time.
Right.
And when you say the Wheels Park, why don't you tell our viewers exactly where the Wheels Park is?
Okay, the Wheels Park is halfway between Jackson Gate Road and Highway 49 at the Martell, in the Martell, and downtown Jackson at the other end. If you go out North Main, from the fire station,
right,
heading north toward Teresa's Restaurant, that's a familiar landmark, and you go about a mile, and it's on the right-hand side.
Right-hand side there.
That's a park that back in the early 70s was given to the city by the county, and it contains the remnants of the four wheels, the wheels that were used to move tailings from the Kennedy Mine headframe area up near Highway 4988 that everybody knows about, down to the impound dam, which is located behind the Senior Center on New York Ranch Road. About a little more than a half mile of, as the crow flies, movement of tailings through these four-wheel processes. So we wrote a grant, which we got for $596,000, and we have raised in the community almost over $100,000 now to refurbish that park. The primary thing is to build a building over wheel number 4. It's 100 years old this year. It was built at the mine site and then numbered and taken apart and then rebuilt at its location in what is now the Wheels Park. And wheel number 4 is the only one that stands on its own. For those people who have been to the Kennedy Mine Amphitheater, watched a play there, and we encourage everybody to do that, you'll walk right by wheel number 1, but it's only being held up. I mean, it's being held up with cables and stuff. We cut the cables,
For people
the wheel will come down.
who haven't seen these wheels, I mean, it's like rebuilding a windmill. I mean, you were talking about, how big is that thing?
That wheel is 58 feet in diameter.
58 feet in diameter.
So you put
huge.
that in perspective, that's, if a story is 8 stories, so you got about
Oh, my
a 7-story building
Oh
there.
my gosh, yeah, it's huge. And I've seen the photos of, the wheels just collapsed. It was either taken apart or just laid on the ground, but there was nothing there. I mean, when you say rebuilding these wheels, I mean, you're building them really from the ground up.
Well, the wheel number 4, we're not building anything. The wheel number 4 has been standing on its own since
been there.
1914. It had a refurbishment back in 2000. We spent about $150,000 with grant money to do that, with the intent of covering it to keep it out of the elements. That never happened. And so 13 years later, the wheel has started to twist a little bit, and some of the boards have started to rot, et cetera. But it's the iconic symbol of Amador County, along with the Kennedy Mine headframe. In Jackson, it's one of the 3 symbols on Jackson's flag. It's got the Serbian church, we have the Kennedy Wheel, and we have the National Hotel.
The iconic symbols.
3 iconic symbols of this area.
Right.
And the Kennedy Wheel system was an attempt to mitigate an environmental hazard. It was probably the first California effort that was engineered to do so, to keep the tailings from being washed away by rain into the streams and creeks and fouling up those for the farmers downstream. There was legislation written to make that enforceable, but actually the Kennedy and the Argonaut and several other mines took it upon themselves to start before that legislation got passed. And so that's what this whole project is about. And as it is an iconic symbol, and as it is a one-of-a-kind engineering marvel in the world. We want to protect it, and we're protecting it by putting a steel frame structure, sheet metal structure over it. They were in a sheet metal building from 1914 to 1942 when the Kennedy mine was shut down. They then tore all the metal off to be used for the war effort, took down the timber because it was timber framed, and left the wheels standing out.
Right.
And two of them have almost totally disintegrated.
When the lumber costs went up, they even took the timber right out of their own homes and
Oh, yeah.
sold it. We're going to come back. We have a little bit of a break. We have about a minute before we take a break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about, what these tailing wheels actually entailed and how they performed, and a little bit more about your background here in Jackson, Keith. And we have this wonderful event coming up, which will be the museum's reopening in the Tailing Wheel Park coming up. And the date on that, I'm going to say it now and later too as well, June 14th. It's
June 14th
Friday, it's the whole weekend.
is the private wine and cheese tasting at the museum.
Okay.
June 15th
15th.
is the museum opens to the public and the grand dedication for the Wheels Party.
The park itself. Great. I wanted to mention it in this part of the show, and then also after we come back after the break, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the history of the gold mining era. I love all that history. But please stay tuned and come back right after the break with Keith Sweet and myself, and we'll have a little more information regarding the Tailing Wheels Park. Thank you.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.